Good evening, everyone. Excuse me. My name is Rodney Obien. I'm the head of special collections and archives at Keene State College in beautiful Keene, New Hampshire. I'll be your host tonight for the third installment of Archives in Context. Archives in Context is a series of online conversations about archives, preservation, and culture in celebration of Archives Month, observed annually in October. Our program is sponsored by Keene State College's Mason Library, the New Hampshire State Archives, and the Vermont State Archives and Records Administration. So now to our program. It is my sincere pleasure to introduce our guest, Jonathan Gitelson. Jonathan is a professor of art at Keene State College and works in a variety of media that includes photography, artist books, video, and public art. Jonathan's work has been exhibited through the United States, Canada, and Europe at venues such as Mass MoCA, the De Cordova Museum, the Milwaukee Art Museum, and Gallery F.56 in Munich, Germany. His work resides in the permanent collections of MoMA in New York City, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Museum of Contemporary Photography, and the Boston MFA. Jonathan's work has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, and the Chicago Tribune. So welcome, Jonathan Gitelson. And before I get started and let you do your thing, I have a few housekeeping notes. Questions will be taken later in the program, so please post your questions in the Q&A box, and I will read them in the order that they were received. Also, this program is being recorded and will be made available on Mason Library's Facebook page. Okay, without further ado, welcome everyone, and let's get started. Hello, Jonathan Gitelson. Long time no see.
I know, forever.
like yesterday, right?
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Jonathan.
I was saying I'm going to screen share and just let me know if I can't see what you're seeing. So if it doesn't look right.
Okay, let me see. Someone gave me a shout out for my hat. Thank you. Okay.
So let me see.
Let's see. Do you got okay? I made you a co-host, so you can do everything.
Cool. All right. I think we are about ready to go.
Okay.
So, give me 1 second. Full screen. All right. No, that's not right. Exit full screen.
I'll turn off my audio. So.
Okay. Do you see my my name?
Yes. You see your name.
And now you see a picture of my office.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Good.
That is your office. Okay.
Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is John. I am a professor of art and design here at Keene State College, and I'm an artist, a working artist. And my work really involves archives. I have a love of the archive, and it's something Rodney and I talk about endlessly. I'm just going to start with a view of my office, and it kind of gives you an idea of like what my office looks like and my studio. And I like to be surrounded by a lot of stuff, and I like to be around it. I think of my office and I think of my studio and most places I habitate as being like an archive of like my comings and goings in life. So that's a bit how I think about the archive. It's a personal one. And so I'm going to share a bunch of projects with you today, and this is a selection of work. It's not the entire body, but I hope you enjoy. So, okay, Rodney, just to be clear, you see the car project written on the white thing there, right?
I think so. Yes. Yes.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to start. I'm going to kind of go chronologically, if that's okay. And, one of the earlier bodies of work that I made as an artist was I was living in Chicago. I grew up in the New York City suburbs, attended college at Marlborough College in Vermont, rest in peace, and then got my MFA at Columbia College in Chicago. And shortly after I graduated graduate school, the first real body of work I made was this piece called the Car Project. And I think of this as like a traveling archive. So that's a photograph of, and last time I'll say this, Rodney, but if at any point you can't see what I'm showing, let me know. But
I'll let you know.
Okay, that's a picture of my car. And at the time, my then girlfriend, now wife, and I were living across the street from this place called the Funky Buddha Lounge, which is like this hip nightclub. And living across the street from a nightclub, I would get tons and tons of flyers like under my windshield wiper every night. And they'd be put in my window and they'd be like littered along the sidewalk. And it was all just this kind of temporary advertisement for different nightclubs all throughout Chicago. And I think of it a bit like a timestamp because I've never been a club goer so much, but nightclubs open and close all the time. And so this is a specific stamp of time. But essentially, I started collecting these artifacts that were like all over the sidewalk in my car. I didn't really know what I was going to do with it, but I felt like, there's an art project here. And you'll see that my art process really kind of comes from my life experience. So my life experience was getting these flyers, started collecting them. And after about a month and a half, 2 months, I had like 1,000 of these flyers for all these different nightclubs. And what I decided to do was to create a car cover. So I bought a car cover from the auto shop that fit my car, and I hand sewed all the nightclub flyers to it. So it became this gigantic quilt, and would park my car in front of the different nightclubs that were advertising to me and would kind of leave it there. And I would photograph. So what is the art, right? Is it the artifacts? Not really. Is it the performance of leaving my car there? Maybe. But then also the documentation of the photograph of the car. And so I would go and photograph my car in front of these, it's a series of 8 photographs on like a Sunday morning, like when it was the opposite of what was being advertised. I like the idea of like the club car being there the morning after, I also learned at this time that it's much better to photograph on overcast days, get less reflection. And so these images were printed like 40 by 50 inches. And the reason why was I wanted viewers to be able to read the flyers in the photographs. So it really became about the car cover, the places, and then also like these really, it's pretty much like softcore pornography all over my car. And I also wanted to photograph them in a way in which they looked kind of abandoned. So a lot of times would be like people around really fascinated by this, but I would kind of wait until the car looked lonely and would make the image. So I think of this, when I was thinking about archives today, I was thinking like, in some ways, all of my projects are about archives, but when I was trying to whittle it down, I was thinking, this is really like an archive of like club flyer culture in 2006 in Chicago. And entourage, and then also the architecture, like these clubs, like I said, they come and they go. So this is what it looked like in a gallery. I built a sculptural piece that made it look like my car was parked in space, and you can see a little bit the scale of the images in the gallery. So another body of work from this time period is a more personal archive, but it's a project called Items of Clothing Secretly Hidden by My Girlfriend So I Wouldn't Wear Them Anymore. And my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, is compassionate in some ways. So in that she, I tend not to be like the most put together person in terms of my attire. And so I had a lot of clothes that she like hated and didn't want to see me wear anymore. But at the same time, I guess she felt a little bit bad about the idea of throwing them away. And one day I was rifling through our closet and I found this bag, and in the bag was all of the clothing I'd been looking for. And like, oh man, this is the sweater. I couldn't find it. It was about nine pieces of clothing. And so in order to make artwork about this, I photographed the clothing at life scale. And I'm going to, I can kind of see. And so this is like at scale, like that's the size of the shirt when I wear it. And then a description at the bottom of why it was edited out. So this is a Carhartt pocket t-shirt, white paint on the front and back. an Eastern Mountain sports roll neck sweater, 100% wool, which according to my wife, after 1993, roll neck sweaters shall not be worn by her husband. Gap athletic short sleeve polo shirt, coffee stain on the front. Gap long sleeve denim shirt, coffee stain on the front. A lot of coffee. J. Crew, another roll neck sweater. So there you go. This was a t-shirt that just had a hole in it that drove her a little bit nuts. Old Navy brand striped t-shirt, bleach stains on the front. Sonoma t-shirt with industrial strength insulation foam on the front. And then this pair of socks, which I just love too much. These I actually like rotated back into my wardrobe, but it became about like creating an archive of like the, you know, these domestic moments of like the things that, it's our relationship, you know, it's like, it's this photograph of that. And so this is an installation view where you can kind of get a sense of the scale. This was the New York Photo Festival in, oh gosh, I don't even know, 2007, I think. And you can just see, it's like the clothing is life scale. It's got the descriptions, etc. And now one of these hangs above our dining room table. So it's a bit of sweet justice, maybe. So for this next project, I have to jump to my website. And so, Rodney, this will be a spot where something might go awry. I'm going to stop my share. And I'm going to switch over to my website, and I'm going to share again. So hopefully you can see my website here.
We can see your website.
Great.
How about that? Good.
And also, you know, I would say, check this out. It says archive, yeah, right there, right? It's I think of my work as an archive, and my website is essentially, I approached it in that way. It's everything, right? It's like everything I've done, just, and you can go through the different projects. But this project in particular is especially, oh, it fits in this category really well. It was called the Garbage Can Project. So let me click on this. And this is an online archive that began as a website. It was a web-based project. It was built in Flash, which no longer exists, and then rebuilt to be what it is today. But essentially, at the time this was made, this was my apartment, and this was the windows of our apartment. And you can see there were garbage cans right out front. And we would get our garbage cans stolen like all the time. I think one year we had like 11 stolen. And we were also the building managers, meaning that we got like a little cheaper rent because we collected rent from the other tenants. And part of that was like having the garbage cans there. So while I'm collecting the club flyers, I'm also watching my garbage cans disappear. And I just became totally fascinated about it. Like, where are they going? What is the life of these objects? And so the project began as an online archive that where each day I would take a photograph of the garbage cans. So you can kind of go through starting December 10th, 2005. It's the first day of the project. Sometimes they move and sometimes the snow melts. And then once in a while there will be one, and then there will be 5. And sometimes I go out of town. So it's like it's a 3.5-year project about my garbage cans. And really you can start tracking, let me see. So I got to go back. If I go to February, there's still only 2. Snowing. Skip ahead a little bit. Now there's 4, right? So it became this like visual archive. And the way I approached this website was every day I would post a picture. And so it was something that people could follow along with live. You know, it was like, how many garbage cans will John have today? Now, how many people actually did that? I don't know. But that was my thinking. And as time continued and things started happening, I decided to set up 24-hour surveillance cameras in my window. So you can see there's like some little plants, but this little like tiny hidden camera, and it would stream to VHS tapes because this is back in 2006. And so I would, I bought these special VHS tapes that would record 12 hours. So twice a day, I'd have to like switch the tape. And then in the morning, I would fast forward through all the footage. And anytime somebody would touch my garbage cans, I built this setup where I could have the VHS tape play into my computer and I could edit out that clip and upload it. So not too long into the project, we start to get things that are more like no video activity, like this, where we have a February 6th, 2007. Here's the garbage cans, and here's every single person who touched my garbage can on that day. And so I would upload the video. I'd fast forward through, I'd edit the clips, and then that morning I would upload all of the examples of people touching them. It's a way of trying to figure out what's happening. And very quickly it became clear that this was more about sociological phenomena than it was about theft. The weirdest things start happening. You know, if you stare at a garbage can long enough, the things that happen are bizarre. And so on the website, there's a couple of different things. The first is a timeline. And so, you know, the entire archive is here. And that's what I mean when I say that my website is an archive. It's not an edit. I like to share everything because I like to look at everything. So the timeline, like, where do I start? This is the timeline of all the important things that happened to the garbage can. You know, on May 22nd, 2006, cart number C459140 is stolen, as well as both carts from Grandin Halstead. So I'd start tracking them as they would move about town too. Like if one disappeared and then I found it, I would start tracking both. The other part of this website that's important is the video highlights. And this is like kind of like the greatest hits. It begins with me painting the tops of them because Google Earth was kind of new at this point, but I like the idea of trying to track them as they moved around the town where I could like see the numbers. So this is the 10th replacement can. This is the first can. And there's a little video of you get the drift. It's like a Sesame Street show, right? But here's some of the highlights. One was like, this is an example. A rat acrobatically climbs into my garbage can. This is the type of stuff that would happen. So I'll show you this video. It's on 29th of November, 2006. And I would update the date stamps on the top so you could know what time it was. So my neighbors. People would take things out of the garbage can. Now here we go. Check this out. It's amazing. And horrifying. So there's his tail going in. And then you'll see like a few minutes later, someone comes by and thank God they didn't go to that garbage can. They went to a different one because that would have been terrifying. People would kick them. People would pee on them. People would throw them around. Here's a guy kicking one. One of my favorites, this is the last one I'll show you, is, well, funny things would happen too. Like here is this example of this man. He walks past, he starts taking pictures inside our window. And that morning I posted on my site, like here, in the video description says, man takes a photograph of my apartment through the front window. And then 2 days later, I got an email and it was from this guy. And he had somehow seen it on the project. And he was like, oh no, I wasn't taking a picture in your window. I was taking a picture of the number 10 on your garbage can. And here's the picture. And so his picture becomes part of the archive, right? It enters into the project. This is my favorite day. So this is the last one I'll share with you. And this is the only theft I caught on tape. I don't know how that's possible. but it seemed like every time I'd go out of town, that's when it would happen. But here I happened to get one. So let me hit play. This is the greatest hit of the greatest hits. So I'm going to narrate it. Begins with a man putting his coffee down on my garbage can at 10:47 a.m. A few hours later, different guy. Keeps on drinking. And there you go. That's my one theft caught on tape. And so the only other thing is like, how to translate something that's like a virtual archive into a physical space. So I was invited to do an exhibition of this work at the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art in 2011, I think. And so it was a matter of like, how do I translate this? And the way that I did was there was a phone which would loop all of my phone call conversations to the city requesting new cans. I'd record them all. Letters from the mayor thanking me for reporting stolen garbage cans. A calendar that contained every image from the project. Here's the letter and the service notice. You can listen to my call to the to replace them. And then a computer, I built this log that had every single incident over, it was 10 and a half hours when collected all together. So I recreated it. I had a plant, I had a camera in there, I had my VHS tapes, my weird setup, and a book that basically whenever you sat down, no one's going to watch the whole thing. So you could just look at whatever data was, flip forward, and see if you wanted to stick around and check out what was going to happen. So I'm going to stop the share now and bounce back to my PowerPoint, if that's cool. So weird giving a talk when it's just me and my screen. Okay.
I'm here.
Cool. All right. I'm going to be bouncing back to my website again in a second. So this is another piece that's happening simultaneously to the Garbage Can Project. I was commissioned by the city of Chicago and the Chicago Transit Authority to create a public artwork in the Armitage Brown Line station. This was, well, it was stated to last 100 years. It's still there. Will it be 100 years? Who knows? But this is a 10-foot by 40-something foot wall. So right when you walk through the turnstiles at the Armitage Brown Line station, you encounter this public artwork. It's made of glass tiles. It's 42 photographs with some text. And then this black and white pattern in the background is a street map of that neighborhood. So when I think about public art, I really think about the idea that it should be about and for the people who live there. And that was kind of my thinking. So I'm going to open my website for a second. And I won't be bouncing back and forth as much. So here's what it would look like walking through. And, the Armitage Brown Line station, it's kind of a posh neighborhood, very historic. And it was being kind of demolitioned, part of it. And they were going to be building a new addition. And so I thought it would be really interesting to make a piece about the people who travel through this space. It's just a few more views of it before I show you what I'm talking about. So so what I decided to do was go to the platform before it was demoed, or whatever the word is, demolitioned, and interview people. And I wanted to interview people, and my question was, tell me about a story of importance from your life that happened in the city of Chicago. And for a lot of reasons, when you're working on public art or you're working for the city, there were a lot of stipulations. So like I couldn't have any people in the photographs because they were worried about a number of things. I couldn't have cars in the photographs because they wanted people to take the train and not the car. So I started thinking about like, how do I tell a story without a picture of the person? And also, how do I ask a question to get the answer that's helpful? So when I first started, I would get, people would tell me their favorite bar or whatever. And that wasn't really what I was going after. I want something more personal. So I refined it and I recorded over 100 stories, and I would have about 8 minutes, right? Like between trains. Like the train would go and there'd be an 8-minute gap where I'd run up to someone and say like, hey, I'm John. Can I ask his question for this project? And so the tiles that are in the station are a photograph of the exact location where the story took place, and then a written excerpt of the transcript. So you can see it right here. And while I thought that was like a nice solution, I really like the idea of like the full story, and like hearing it in somebody's voice. So on my website, there's an archive of all of the tiles with an audio clip of all of the stories. And so I'll play you maybe one or two as I go through. I'm going to look for ones that are a bit shorter. This is a good one.
But I can have fond memories of Monroe Harbor. One night it was at night, and I took a boat out by myself and sailed almost completely across the lake, came back, buoyed up at the buoy, and took a little dinghy back to the shore. But it was the first time I'd been at night. It's very scary at night. You can't see anything. And I got so far out that I couldn't even see the Sears building. I was that far out, and that was kind of scary.
And then another one, this is one of my favorite stories. So we're looking at the picture on the left. This is the entry point to Hyde Park, which is a neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. It's an interesting neighborhood because it's like it's where the University of Chicago is. It's where Obama has his home. It's also very, set in a very poor part of the south side of Chicago. So this is the story that accompanies this picture.
That has a special place for me is Hyde Park. When I was a kid, I came up in Robert Taylor homes, and I came from the west side of Chicago, and Chicago's always been bleak based on where I've lived and based on the conditions I had to live under. We got to the south side. I moved in Robert Taylor homes, and I'll never forget one day we went over to Hyde Park just exploring. And when I crossed Drexel Avenue into Hyde Park at 51st Street, I literally thought I was in another town. I didn't know people lived the way they lived as they were living in Hyde Park. And this is about 1962. My experiences had been from the slums on the west side of Chicago to the projects on the south side. And so when I went over to Hyde Park, I literally thought I was in another city. Yeah, it helped to refocus me and let me know that there's something else out there. Exposure is what it's all about, and Hyde Park exposed me to a whole new world, and my life's never been the same since.
So on the website, there's 42 images with 42 stories that people are invited to explore. All right, back to the PowerPoint. Gotta love Zoom. Okay, and then I moved to Brattleboro. So I got offered a job at Keene State College. I knew Brattleboro because I'd gone to Marlboro College and moved back to the area. And that first winter that we were here was the most intense winter snow-wise in 100 years. We got 161 inches of snow. That was 2010, 2011. I always have to start everything with a little story, I guess, before. But basically, it was the end of April. I was walking to my studio, which was down the street. and the birds were singing, and it was that spring kind of like winter's over, everyone's happy. And I looked down and I saw a pile of snow, and it was just so disheartening. And what I decided to do was to drive around the town of Brattleboro and photograph every pile of snow I could find. And I would do that every day until I found the last pile. And then I would watch that until it melted. So it was like my way of proving to myself that, winter was over, snow was gone. So, and once I'd collected all of these images, like the photographs of the last piles of snow, I created this handmade map. So this is hand drawn. The photographs are adhered to this map. So it's, photographic prints glued to the larger piece. And it's about 4.5 feet tall by 9 feet wide. It's a very big map. And it takes us through the town. So that's where my house was. I was across from the Green Street School, if you know Brattleboro, and that was the pile that inspired the journey. And you can see my I don't know, my hand-drawn marks and things like that. And so I would just drive around. There's this chart on here that talks about the snow totals by month. So it's pretty crazy, like December 24.9 inches, January 63, February 52.2, March 14.1, and April 7.3. And I love maps. It's like, I just love maps. And then once I found the last pile of snow, I made a handmade sign and I planted it in the ground and I left it there and would go back every day and photograph the last pile of snow. And I would leave it there because I wanted other people who walked past. I mean, they might just be like, what is going on here? But it was kind of like a celebration. Like, don't worry, this is the last pile of snow. And so this is the last day of the last snow in Brattleboro. And so when it was installed, it was like the map, the photograph, and the sign. It was like the three components of this piece. I also make artist books, and that's like a big part of my practice. I love books. I was a literature student in college, and I love making books, and I love looking at books and thinking about books, and that's probably how Rodney and I became friends. And so this is a book that I made called Class Pictures, really kind of inspired by the fact that I have kids, and like we would get their class pictures. And I have a mom who's as much of an archivist as I am, where she, every single thing from my growing up is in their house. So this is a book of my class pictures by year. So cute. Yeah, so this is pre-K. And it's like a journey through time. I think that might be kindergarten. I got very serious. A little bit less serious. And I love it's a timestamp also because, I know what class pictures look like now. Like they would have us sit in front of like actual books. They'd be like, fold your hand. It would be like this whole like production. This is where things get really awkward in 5th grade. The mesh shirt and the gold chain. You can tell I grew up in the New York suburbs in the 80s. Little Tony Soprano. This is the only photograph I can't find. This is 9th grade. So, perhaps it's an incomplete archive, but then we'll go to 10th grade. Big jump, 11th grade, and then my senior year in high school. And so that's the book called Class Pictures. And I'm going to show you one more book. This next part's an excerpt, but the entire thing's online. Is a book called Antipode. And this was made, I was, again, inspired by having kids. Like I started thinking about the idea when I was a kid about digging a hole to China, which of course doesn't make any sense, but that was like what kids would say, like dig a hole to China. And I started thinking about like, what is on the opposite side of the earth from my studio? And so I figured out how to just like, plug in the numbers and all the stuff, where I found out where my antipode was. An antipode is the definition of the opposite side of the world from where you are. And the opposite side of the world from where I am is it's in the middle of the Indian Ocean, off the coast of Australia, about 500 to 700 miles. It's weirdly enough, like kind of really close to where the Malaysian airplane disappeared. And it was at the same time I was making this, which made me kind of like, hope I'm not on too many watch lists or whatever. But so the book is about me trying to go to I decided I wanted to go there. I was like, I want to go make a photograph of the place on the earth opposite me. So this book is about my attempt to do that. And it's a book of text, of emails. So it starts with the definition of what an antipode is. And this was a letter. I started reaching out to every sea captain I could find in Australia on the western part. My name is Jonathan Gitelson. I'm an artist living in the US. I'm beginning a new photo project, and I want to photograph the antipode of my house in Vermont. Turns out this location is in the middle of the Indian Ocean, blah, blah, blah. And then, telling them too much information, like this is by far my most ambitious project, and I'm currently writing a series of grants to help fund it, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I was trying to get there, and long story short, you can't. You can't get there. And to me, there's something really beautiful about the idea that there's a place on the planet I can't go to. It's too far out for a boat. It's too far out for a small airplane. The only boats that are out there are like gigantic tankers that are not going to take me to the coordinates that I wanted. So the piece essentially became an archive of my correspondence with these different fishermen in Western Australia. And there's lots of funny things. You get like logos, get people saying like, wow, that's a long far from anywhere, mate. I'm sorry, I'll be unable to assist. Try a charter company in Perth or Albany, best of luck. People were really nice for the most part. Made some Facebook friends. So then I refined my my letter, hoping that would like help. And again, like, sorry, unable to help, or people would connect me with other people. But everybody seemed to say like, there's just like no way we can do it, except for one boat said they could do it, but they were going to charge me like $70,000. And I feel like when the Coast Guard says no and one random guy says yes, that's a little suspicious. It's extremely in the ocean and can be unpredictable weather. I'm unsure what you wish to achieve and what you expect to photograph that could not be done anywhere offshore. I'm sure many people who've seen this piece think that. Sorry, no, So this is like an excerpt of them. So then I refined my letter again. My name is John Gitelson. I'm an artist in the US. I'm trying to make an aerial photograph of the ocean to the west of Australia and would like to commission a helicopter. My dates are open. The coordinates are. Hope this makes sense. Can you take me there? And again, everybody just said, no, it's not going to happen. Like, we can't get out that far. Like the last note of the book, it's all chronological, like the correspondences, but it just worked out that the last email I got said, we don't have the range to get offshore that far. I'm not sure who in Australia would. Regards. And that's the book. So it's just like the book is my attempt to get to my antipode and failing. Moving forward a little bit, and I hope I'm doing okay on time. This is a piece that I made, which debuted at Mass MoCA, which for me was a really big deal because it's my favorite museum in the world. It's called Marginalia. And, there's a lot of archivists out there, so maybe you know what this word means, but if not, marginalia is the writing in the margins of books, right? Or like the underlining, or I write in books. I love to. I think of it as like a personal history. So I got this idea where I wanted to build a library consisting entirely of books with marginalia. Like I didn't really care about what the books were. I was more interested in like the notes that were left. And really the idea being that something is important enough to note, but then re-released into the world. And also just, getting a glimpse into people's lives. And so I spent a lot of time in the fall of 2015 going to use bookstores, and use bookstores try not to acquire books with marginalia because they are less valuable and people don't really want that. So being the romantic that I am, I was like, it'll be like being a DJ digging through record bins, and so I'd go to a bookstore. There were a few that I found that were great. And I would just start on one shelf and I would flip through every single book. Spend the whole day just flipping through every book. And every time I'd find something with interesting notes in it, I would take it. And some of the store owners started getting into it and like helping me. So this is a library of about 2,000 books, and every single book in it has the writing of the previous owner. And for the exhibition, it was really important to me that people could interact with it. So it was visitors to the museum were invited to pull the books off the shelf, look through and find the marginalia themselves. And then I also provided small bookmarks so that anytime somebody found a book or a piece of marginalia they found interesting, they could put a bookmark in it for the next person who came along. The image on the left is just something I love so much. It's so simple, but it's somebody had used a piece of newspaper as a bookmark, and the acid from the paper burned the book. And over time it slipped. So it becomes this like gentle gradient of newspaper burn. And here are some examples. So this is just a small edit from the collection. I'll sing solo gospel and music focused on healing and empowering, lifting up men, brotherhood, and gay male relationships. Next one is more of a journal type thing. Make a list of things you are self-conscious about. What to wear, how to talk, what to do, how to do my hair, when to laugh, when to cry, and when to talk. That's not heartbreaking, you know. Where are you, Lindy? Or the middle one is, it's like it's a German textbook, like someone was stashing probably like their weed in there or something, but it was like all hollowed out, which just made me so excited. The next one's great. It's Our Town. And this is like, in my imagination, this is some angsty high school student, like, I'll kill myself this summer if I have to come back here next year. Like, I'll never see you after this year. And the whole thing is filled with like this angsty, like, I hate these people. This place sucks. Like, this place is dumb. So, you know, you get a glimpse of the person. Here's this thing I remember doing this in high school where you cross certain things off and put in letters. So down south, didn't you suck asses or something like that? It's a separate piece by John Knowles. His talk rolled on, ignoring and covering my look of shock and clumsiness. You know, for much polishing, the balls were hung with miniatures. It's so dumb, but I love it. Sometimes people get really organized, you know, like how many highlighters there are and different ways of annotating information. This was Cantor's notes from a temple. And then there'd be drawings, you know, this is from 1920. The writing of them is just my sentiments. And it's like this beautiful, like R. Crumb type drawing. And then I made a couple of artworks based on the work in the book. So this is it's titled Star Chart. And I scanned not all because there's like bazillion, but like a ton of different stars that people had put in the margins of the books where something was important, and compiled them all together. It's a couple hundred margin stars. And I also created a body of work that was these highlighter swaths. And so what I love about this is it kind of speaks to my own neuroses, is these pages are pages where the person who owned the book highlighted every line on the page. And the idea that, you know, if you highlight everything, you're highlighting nothing. And so there's something beautiful about that, but also like the color, like that hot pink. And so I just digitally removed the text, you know, Photoshop. And what we're left with is like these color field paintings, basically, that are in different highlighter colors. So I'd love to one day get the full range, but I have orange, blue, purple, and then there's a yellow one. So there you can see the star chart hanging up. And then the last piece of the project was a vitrine filled with things that were left in the books, like as bookmarks or as like artifacts, just, you know, the like little treasures you find in a used book that, you know, probably the person didn't know was there or whatever. So this are two views of like what the vitrine looked like, you know, and it was, again, it's partial collection because the whole thing is big, but here's some great examples. Picture on the left is this image. I like to think it's like some insurance fair in like the 80s where they had these Aura cameras. The amazing thing is, and this is what's so like wonderful about art, is like this guy went to the show and emailed me and was like, no way, man, that was me. I remember that conference. And, you know, it's like a way of connecting with a stranger. I love the text in this one. Dear Ted, I finally remembered to bring this book in. Now I can't think of anything to say about it except that I hope you enjoy it. I find myself seeking your critical approval. It's like something beautiful about that last sentence. A picture from Korea, a sonogram. And I covered the name, but crazy scribblings of TV schedules. A suicide note. Serious thoughts of killing myself today. Who am I writing to? Not divested to anyone, but who is reading what I have written? And then an old postcard where somebody drew on top of it, my room, where we are staying. And just a kind of intimate glimpse into like this person's relationship. So moving right along, in 2015-16, I started working on a project called Are You Here? And this was part of the inspiration was like this phrasing of you are here. And, you know, my background's existential literature. So I'm always thinking about whether or not I'm here, in what capacity. So it was a project where I rented 14 rural billboards all across upstate New York, Western Mass, Connecticut. Vermont doesn't allow them, and New Hampshire was sold out, which is awesome. And these billboards, I wanted to create something that was like an intervention into somebody's like daily life where they're not really paying attention. It was kind of inspired by, you know, being in conversations with people who are looking at their phone, or about me as a parent, like not worrying that I'm missing things, you know, or whatever. And so I wanted to make this thing where people would drive past. These were all like really rural situations where there aren't other billboards around them. And people would see it and would, for a moment, just look and be present. And the reason why I'm including this in the project is because, or in the lectures, because really for me, the billboards were the piece and the photographs are the archive. It's like the collection of images documenting where they were in time. You know, do I sell the pictures? Yeah. So like maybe that's the art too. You know, it's like complicated, the relationship between all of this, but really I think of the photographs as like the documentation of the artwork. And so there's 14 of these all over the place, a lot in upstate New York, just like cheaper. This is going towards Bennington on Route 9. And there was one that was a digital billboard, which I'll show you one rotation of. It's on I-91. The absurdity of the world, right? So that was I-91 in Chicopee, and then it's been also at, you know, different institutions where, again, like this is the documentation of it, in Brattleboro Museum. And so the documentation becomes the art, but it's also the documentation of the show and the documentation of the billboard. So it's like head spinning. And this was an exhibition in Boston where I created wallpaper so people could kind of get the feeling of standing in front of one of these, even though they were only up for a month. So this is like a 20-foot wide wall. I think I got two more things and I'll be quick. Let's start by saying the obvious. This was a piece, again, another storytelling time with John. So I was washing the dishes one night and I had to do something that I felt inadequate to do, like maybe it was like teach a class or give a talk like this or whatever. And I thought, I was just like thinking to myself, like, oh my God, who am I to like be an authority on this? And I started thinking about like, what do you say when you don't know what to say? And this phrase popped in my head, like, let's start by stating the obvious. It sounds like you know what you're talking about, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. And, let's start by stating the obvious. I'm talking to you on Zoom. It's like, doesn't mean anything, but it sounds like it means something. And it sounds like if you don't know this information, you're an idiot. So it's like this weird kind of phrasing. And so I just Googled the phrase, let's start by stating the obvious. And the piece are a bunch of screen prints that are the first 8 things that popped up on Google. And, just that first sentence where like things are bolder when you do a Google search. The thing is, is this custom designed for me because Google has algorithms, right? So maybe it's just like the top 8 on that night for me, or if I Google it now, something different comes up. In fact, my website comes up, which is, I love. But so this is just really the 8 things that came up, the first sentence of the Google results. Let's start by stating the obvious. Most recreational fishermen do not own a boat. Let's start by stating the obvious. All surfaces in a landscape have to be covered with something. That's my favorite. It's like amazingly stupid. Start by stating the obvious. Every strategy works. Let's start by stating the obvious. Things are not good, nor do they look like they are getting better. Let's start by stating the obvious. Being able to predict volcanic eruptions is good. Let's start by stating the obvious. This is a $30 hotel. Let's start by stating the obvious. The term trade or business is comprised of 3 words: trade or business. Let's start by stating the obvious. The internet is a vast realm. And yeah, I just like love this, like the kind of poetry of it. So this is what it would look like installed. It's these screen prints of the 8 top results on that night when I searched for that phrase. And then the most recent piece I've completed is a piece called Free. And in a lot of ways, I think of this in terms of like the Are You Here project, in terms of seeing language in the landscape and the way in which it can kind of work on us. So I think we've all seen like free signs, right? They're like all over the place, especially in the summertime. And what I love about them is, like the different materials, different fonts, the different handwriting. But what I noticed as I would drive around Brattleboro was that I would just start to see this word reappearing. And if I took it out of the context of like free stuff and just looked at it as the word free, it was like this little like message that was being delivered. Every time I drive around, it'd be like free. Yeah, I like that word. It feels good, like freedom, be free, all of these things. So I started collecting them. And my collection now is like, I don't know, it's like after that summer, it was about like 300 signs. And I had a whole kit in my car. So like if I took a sign, I would replace it with another sign so that, I didn't want to screw up someone's free giveaway thing. But it's installed as a grid. It's like salon style oversaturation of this word free. And so it's an archive of all of these signs. It's from one summer. And yeah, it just becomes this like really interesting like tapestry of this word. And one of the things that was really interesting, when I'll have an opening, a lot of times I'll just kind of back up a little bit and just like listen and hear what people are saying. A lot of people talked about how the more they looked at it, the more the word looked misspelled. And also how it was just like, it just became this like overwhelming abstraction. So just a couple of views. And then it was commissioned as a billboard too. This is in Manchester, New Hampshire, by the Curator Museum of Art as part of this exhibition put out by Four Freedoms, which is an amazing nonprofit organization. So I like the idea of putting a free sign on a billboard. And I believe that is my presentation. So thank you. I hope that all worked smoothly. And like I said, on my website, there's a lot more work, and all these bodies of work, if you like them, are there in like their complete
in your archive.
archiveness. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now John, there's one question. I have a few questions, and if folks don't mind indulging us just a little bit, I know we'll be going over the 8 o'clock hour, but please, if you can't stay with us, please stay. So, first question, and thank you, John. I love seeing your stuff. Grace asked this question. I've loved your presentation so far. I was curious which project you've done, which you've done is your favorite, which was the most memorable making?
Gosh, I think the one that, like everyone, I get insecure. So there are some things I make and I'm not sure. And then I look back at them later, I'm like, yeah, that was good. Or like I did that right. Or maybe I would do this differently or whatever. The only time I've really had a show where I felt like this is like how I would want to, I'd be psyched to walk in this room. Like, this is like what I would want to experience was, I think, Marginalia at Mass Mocha. It just felt like it just felt right. I didn't feel insecure about it. And I knew as a viewer, if I'd walked in there, I would have enjoyed the process, like, of interacting. I like interactive artwork. The most memorable, really all of them. I mean, like, they all have like drawing the map of the snow. Like, that was like months of just sitting there drawing grass, or driving around. The billboard pictures took me a whole summer to photograph, and like all of this driving and this like memory of like trying to film that sign. It's like they all really kind of, for me, the process of making is always pretty memorable. And oftentimes I'm like, thank God I don't have to do that anymore. Like, good to go.
Okay, thank you, Grace, for the question. So I have a few questions. Oh, let me ask my question, and I'll go to the next question. So a reoccurring theme or thing that you do is collecting, documenting, archiving. And so from my point of view, or because I was wanted to, is that more your artistic practice, or is that performance?
I think it's just me, like, okay. I think about even when I was in high school, like the walls of my bedroom were so covered in stuff that my parents and I had to like put corkboard on the ceiling so it could start like covering. The ceiling was covered with like stuff, and I've always been like a collect. I have boxes and boxes of like every note anyone's written me, or like, from high school, or like what I collect stuff. I like collecting, and for me, it's like comforting. Like, it's not, I mean, maybe it's performative, I don't know, but I would do it whether I was like showing the stuff or not. Like, it's just like, it's who I am as a collector of stuff.
It's okay. Thanks. Let's see. I got one. I'll ask this question from the Q&A box, and there was one in the chat. Someone asked, do you start projects knowing you're starting a project, or do they sort of just happen and then you continue?
I usually know I'm starting a project. Not all projects get followed through. But the moment where the project is born is like less anticipated. So it'll be like the starting to obvious. It just popped in my head, like, I was just like washing dishes or doing whatever, and it presented itself. Or sometimes it's something that's been like percolating for years. I'm working on a project right now that was really it's a radio piece, and it was really I started thinking about the idea of radio waves back in like 2016 when I had a radio show. Like, it's so, but usually when I start, like, I kind of always know, like, okay, this is the next project I'm going to start, or like I already know 2 or 3 projects out and have started like slightly tinkering with them, even though I have to focus on the project I have going. But yeah, I usually know, like, yeah, I'm now starting, I've committed, I just make a decision, like, I will now make this project. Like I'm gonna go all in for it.
Thanks. Ali asks, what was your inspiration for the antipode? Am I pronouncing that right?
Antipode?
Antipode project.
The inspiration was just like being around kids, being around my kids, like remembering like these weird, that was for like the yearbook thing too, is like just like trying to put my brain back into like that frame of mind. It could have been like something one of my kids said, I don't know, but it definitely came from like putting myself in the brain of like my kids and being like, and then just thinking like, wow, that would be like fun to fly to the ocean and make a picture. I thought I'd be able to do it. And the absurdity of it, like I like absurd things.
Thank you, Ali, for your question. And Autumn asks, what is the most shocking discovery about society you come across while doing a project?
Shocking. I guess maybe I'd say like the garbage cans, just because I spent so much time watching people that didn't know they were being watched, and just seeing how people behave and that it defied kind of my expectations sometimes. Like you'd see somebody like very in a fur coat or something who would like go into the garbage can and try something on, or it was just like, it was surprising to see what would happen. That was like the excitement of that piece. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know.
Thank you, Autumn. John asks, can you discuss your relationship between the ephemeral and the permanent?
Oh boy. So, I guess part of my obsession is the idea that like everything's ephemeral, right? Like, it gets into my backstory, but like when I was in college, like my first love was Albert Camus, and that was like really what I focused on, and like the idea of like, even the things that we think are forever are not, and that it's, I think maybe that's like some of the neuroses of collecting, is like trying to like hold on to all this stuff for a second to make sense of it. So when I think of the permanent, everything's always changing. And I find as I've gotten older, I think when I was younger, my work and so a lot of stuff I didn't show is like, it's more like there's like some more humor in a different kind of way in it. And I think as I've gotten a little older and more reflective, it's become a little bit more about the atmospheric. And the piece I'm working on right now, which I didn't talk about, but is it's about invisible airwaves, and like the idea that like above us is like a sea of radio waves that we can't see. So I've been doing a lot of research about like the invisible, art of the invisible. And but yeah, I think it's like, it's like the confronting the fact that things aren't permanent is part of my experience as like a human. So I don't know if that answers anything, but
so I think for me, collecting or just it's just trying to hold on to something that's going to disappear. That's just it's going to disappear someday, but
it's even like I inherited all my grandparents' old photographs, and they were very apt photographers, but I don't know who any of the people are anymore, and my parents don't know. And there are all these like memories and these things, but they're detached from what grounded them. So now there's something different. Like
but you still know that they're relatives. There's
right.
So, I guess.
but maybe well, my kids, like it's just like, it's, yeah.
Yeah. So Peyton has a question. He asked, for the Chicago story, did you realize a correlation between the people you interviewed and their experience and the picture?
Correlation between
the people you interviewed and their experiences with the picture. That you
so I would approach anyone, right? Like anyone, as long as they're willing to talk to me. The stories were sometimes surprising. Like you would think you were going to get one kind of a story and get something that was like profound in a different way. And then there was like this, I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but like going out and photographing the place, it was like I felt a connection to these, like it was a random playground somewhere where all of a sudden I have like this person and the story connected to this place. It made like the place more significant. And so it like the combination of the person and their story, which I had no idea how to anticipate that, would alter my experience as I like engaged with the physical space. A lot of places I went to I'd never been. Like I didn't know that neighborhood. I didn't even know it existed. And suddenly I'm like there and I'm like, I know something that happened here. I don't know if that answers.
Thank you, Peyton. So I have two questions. If anyone else doesn't have any, and then we can wrap it up. I know you taught a class. We can talk as much as you want. We could talk for the rest of the night. So I mean, this is fun. So as I was looking at your projects and sort of thinking through this idea of archives and sacredness. So I've been a professional archivist for almost 30 decades, and so I've been taught and indoctrinated to think archival materials are sacred and precious. But you took flyers and you sewed them to the cover of a card. You display them. You like to write in books and so forth. And I'm actually cool with that. But is there anything in terms of archival material that is too sacred to touch? As an artist or as an individual. So I'm just curious about that, because we have different roles here. I have to make sure things persist, but your art,
I would say like,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, like it's such a good question. I'm gonna think about this all night.
Tell me tomorrow, okay?
Yeah, no, one thing would like there's certain things that are like cultural artifacts or things that are like they're not that I feel like maybe I don't have a place, or I try to be respectful of the fact that it's not of my culture or things. Or there were some things like there were some things I didn't include in the library that I felt like were too intimate or yeah. But I think in terms of things, there are certain things. I don't know. I'm really gonna have to think about that. Yes, the answer is yes, but I mean,
that's something. I mean, I teach archives, and so I have to sort of take care of things, preserve things, but so I really appreciate what you do in art, and it's so I'm just curious as an artist, and this is something we could talk about again more about sort of this notion of sacredness and the issues of preservation and so forth. But let's I guess I have some other questions I wanted to ask you, but I know people have been really great with sticking with us. I personally, one of the things I do is help artists archive their art, their estate, their stuff, and I do a lot of that. And so I just wanted to ask you, as someone who has a lot of stuff, um, and I would just assume equate your stuff as your archive. Have you ever given thought about the future? What's going to happen to all your stuff?
Yeah, I think it's
Will it
gonna.
all be on eBay? Your son, put it on eBay or Etsy or
It's,
free. A sign with a free sign in the front of your.
well, there are materials that fade, right? So there's
Yeah.
there's physical things that are not permanent, but there's also, I mean, it goes back to that idea of permanence and impermanence. Is like none of it's permanent. Like there will come a time where I mean, maybe something's in a collection, a museum or something, but even that, like there will come a time where the museum will deaccession or it won't exist anymore or whatever. I mean, I think I look at everything as impermanent. So no, in terms of like my collection of stuff, what becomes of it is like I have no idea, but probably it won't be preserved. Like I don't think, but I try my best to like create. I'm always thinking about like my kids and stuff, like preserving stuff so that they have a sense of like what things were like, what I was into, it's kind of morbid, but like no, but I think, or my grandkids or my great grandkids, like they want to know. I was always interested in my relatives, so it's kind of like a preservation in that way, but like the the things in my office the day I pack up my office, like not all of this stuff's going to be preserved. So I try to take pictures of stuff. The one regret I have is I don't have any pictures of my high school bedroom. I'm still looking. But yeah, I mean, it's like part of it is like, that's why I put it up and put it around me and like to be surrounded by stuff, I think is because I see it. The stuff that I have in boxes, maybe once a year I'll dig through and look at something, but really there's already so much of my stuff that it gets forgotten. So I don't know, I don't think any of it's permanent in the big picture.
Well, if you ever need help archive it,
yeah, let's do
it.
Okay, all right.
So I should end it now, and we keep going, and you and I are going to continue having this conversation.
Yeah.
I know, but John, thank you so much for spending your evening with us, and thank you everyone who's with us, who joined us with us tonight.
I will say, like, anyone who wanted to like reach out, like all my contact stuff is on my website, and if you had questions or if you have a question or whatever, reach out.
What is your email? freejohn at
yeah
gmail.com
with no H, at
no H
Gitelson.com. So
yeah. Yeah. Free John. Okay, remember that. So well, everyone, thank you again. Just a reminder, our last conversation will be next week with Dan White, film editor and archivist for Florentine Films, and I will have a conversation about his current project to organize the Florentine Film Archive. So that will be Wednesday, October 27th, 7 p.m. And recording of our session tonight with Jonathan Gitelson will be available hopefully tomorrow on Mason Library's Facebook page. So again, thank you everyone. Thank you, Jonathan, John, Free John, and good night.
Good night.
Farewell.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rodney. This was so great. I could do it all night.
Fun. Let's keep going.
I'm ready. Let's do it. So
okay.
Cool, man. This was great. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'd love to do more stuff with you.